Today it's week 2 of our study on the 7 miracles in the Gospel of John, and that brings us to chapter 4, where Jesus heals an official's son. Here's what we're going to learn. Jesus invites us to bring our needs to him, knowing that he can do miracles whenever he chooses, even still today. His action tests the quality of our faith. Let's take a look at the text. John 4, verse 46 says, Jesus traveled through Galilee. He came to Cana, where he had turned the water into wine. That's what we looked at last week. There was a government official in nearby Capernaum whose son was very sick. When he heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went and begged Jesus to come to Capernaum to heal his son, who was about to die. Verse 49, the official pleaded, Lord, please come now before my little boy dies. And then Jesus told him, go back home, your son will live. And the man believed what Jesus said and started home. Now, there are a few lessons that we can draw out of this short but powerful story. And the first one is this. Jesus can do miracles with only a word. He's God, and all of creation must obey his commands. Notice that Jesus didn't even have to go to Capernaum to perform this sign. He just spoke the word in verse 50, and the kid was healed. This reminds us of the account of creation in Genesis 1. It says in verse 3, God said, let there be light, and there was light. God and God alone has the authority to speak things into existence. He's doing it here in the very first chapter of the Bible. And when we skip to John chapter 4, he does the exact same thing. He speaks healing this time into existence, and it's still God who's doing it because, of course, Jesus is God. Remember, that's part of the reason that John is recording these miracles. It's to reveal the true nature of Jesus himself. It's to prove out what he wrote in the very first verse in his gospel. In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. Of course, John is talking here about Jesus. He's saying that Jesus is God, and that's what his whole gospel is trying to show us. And the miracle in John chapter 4 does just that. It proves that Jesus is God himself. Here's the second thing. Jesus does miracles for a purpose. He used them not just to reveal himself, but to reveal what was going on in the people around him. Take a look at what Jesus said in verse 44. He said, a prophet is not honored in his own hometown. His point was that the people of Galilee were only interested in his miracles. They weren't actually interested in Jesus as Lord of their lives. That's why he asked in verse 48, will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs and wonders? He's drawing a contrast between the general Jewish public and this official from Capernaum who actually was probably hated by the Jewish people. We're going to see that this guy had genuine faith in Jesus while everyone else was just there for the big show. In fact, if you zoom out and take in a little bit more context, the story right before the passage we're looking at says that many Samaritans from the village believed in Jesus. And if you do a little research, you'll notice that they didn't believe because of some miracle. They believed because they heard his teachings and they were convinced that he was sent from God. Now, there's one more takeaway from the story in John chapter 4, and here it is. Jesus invites us to ask for miracles. God still heals today, but we can't presume on his purpose or timing. Notice in the text it says that this man went and begged Jesus. He was in a place of real desperation, and maybe some of you right now are in that same place in your own lives. And so pay attention to this. You can come to Jesus with boldness and bring your request before him. And I want to point one more thing out in the passage. Notice in verse 50, it said that the man believed what Jesus said when Jesus told him that your son will live. But then later, when the man was on his way home and he heard from his servants that his son was indeed healed, it says that he and his entire household believed in Jesus. And there's a difference in these two types of faith. First, he believed what Jesus said, but later, he actually placed his faith in Jesus Christ. There's a difference between believing that Jesus is genuine and believing that Jesus is your Savior and Lord. And it appears in this story that the official's faith made that transformation. And not just the official, but his whole family. And in your journey of faith, maybe God will use a desperate situation to show you who he really is. And maybe he'll even perform a miracle for you. But the question you'll have to answer at the end of the day, miracle or not, is whether you believe in the Jesus of the Bible.